Well, hello again, and welcome to Live from My Office. I'm glad you're here. And by the way, I hope you heard our 100th episode. It's still up now, available right where you're listening to this podcast and everywhere you listen. You can always go to CochranShow.com if you prefer to do that, because there's extra stuff there, and all the episodes are there too. But the 100th episode is sort of a best of, if you will, but it's a nice sampler for what we did in our first 99 episodes of Live from My Office, all encompassed in that 100th episode with a nifty, and I mean nifty. I don't drop the word nifty that often, but a nifty song done by musical director of the program, John DeCoss, and his brilliant son, Christopher DeCoss. Christopher on the music and the vocals. John wrote the words, and yeah, I think you'll like it. That's on the 100th episode of Live from My Office. Look, I hope you will subscribe, rate, and review so you don't miss any of these fine episodes ever. And, of course, thanks as always to David Hochberg, 855-56-DAVID, 56david.com. Team Hochberg is the title sponsor of Live from My Office. On his show today, we're bringing back two of my good pals who I always turn to for politics, and there's plenty of politics to talk about. I had a conversation with Pat Brady, former head of the Republican Party in the state of Illinois, and Eric Edelstein, who is in charge of imaging and media for some of the most prominent Democrat candidates. The good thing about these two guys, if you've not heard them before, is they can have a conversation without screaming at each other. I know. What a unique concept. So Edelstein and Brady coming up. And then to pay it forward, I called on an old friend who is a part of a charitable organization in Minneapolis, which I think is well worth mention and your attention. And we'll get to that before the end of the show as well. But let me begin with this. Speaking of politicians, here's how you don't help. Congresswoman Maxine Waters over the weekend did a video that caused the judge in this case with Derek Chauvin to say to the defense attorney, she may have given you something you can actually use on appeal that could turn this whole thing over. Now, that may have been hyperbole or exaggeration at the time, but the judge was very upset. And he added, I wish elected officials would stop talking about this case, especially in a manner that's disrespectful to the rule of law, the judicial branch, and our function. He said, I think if they want to give their opinions, they ought to do it in a respectful way and just be consistent with their oath to the Constitution and have respect for the judicial branch, co-equal branch of government. Seems very fair. What Maxine Waters said was, we've got to stay in the street and demand justice. She said, we're looking for a guilty verdict, and we're looking to see if all the talk that took place and has been taking place after they saw what happened to George Floyd, if nothing does happen, then we know we've got to not only stay in the street, but we got to fight for justice. And she even added, we got to get more confrontational. Now, she has since dialed back those comments and said that's not what she meant, but she's been a public servant for a very long time. She's a very intelligent woman who knows that her words matter. She's a politician, for crying out loud. And what she said was irresponsible. Now, fortunately, as I record this, which is 7:45 Minneapolis time on April 20th, the verdict has been rendered. Derek Chauvin is guilty on all three counts. And camera drop-ins at cities around the country, including here in Chicago where I am, are showing peaceful protests, celebration, I guess relief-filled protests as much as anything. But the irresponsibility of politicians jumping in, and it goes all the way to the White House because President Biden could have certainly chosen his words better. But Maxine Waters, the governor of Minnesota, made some very irresponsible statements leading up to this verdict today. And then, of course, the overreaction on the other side from the Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, and the Republicans like Kevin McCarthy, Ted Cruz, and the like, who continue to suck up to Donald Trump and back his lies, calling out Maxine Waters. Now, here's where the Democrats screwed up. The Democrats should have said Maxine Waters needed to choose her words better. She made a mistake. It's not any better than if the mistake's made on the other side. But instead, they said, oh, the Republicans are making something out of nothing. This is why people don't trust politicians. Because as insane as the Republican Party has been, when actions are repeated by Democrats, you have to call it out as well. There has to be consistency, and that's why we in the 60 are tired of it. 20% on the left, 20% on the right, 60% of us in the middle. who want sane governance and help from the government, not this kind of foolishness. Keep it in mind when you go to vote. It won't be long before Congresswoman Waters is going to want to be reelected, and Kevin McCarthy is going to want to be reelected, and whoever is your congressperson, and maybe even your senators up in the midterm. Just keep it in mind. You've had it, and if they're part of the far right or far left, then tell them it's done. They no longer get your support. Now, in a more upbeat side of this, I think there's two things we need to mention. One is the pressure that goes to being a member of a jury. And while we know, if we're fair about this, that there is no way that the Derek Chauvin guilty verdict in the murder of George Floyd solves all the wounds of the years of injustice and irresponsibility and violence and horrible things that have been done. Well, civil rights and the fight for civil rights has gone on. This verdict doesn't fix it. Not even close. But to be fair, it's not supposed to. Each trial, each case is to be judged on the merits of that case. And in this case, Chauvin rightfully found guilty by a jury of 12 who didn't ask to be part of it, but did their civic duty as jurors at great personal sacrifice, and frankly, I'd say even risk to themselves, and came back with a unanimous verdict of guilty on all three charges. Good for them. Good for them. And I hope they are safe. I pray for them and their safety, and I thank them for their service. But let's remember that this is no more a fix for the problem of racism in this country than it is a statement that all cops are racist. You know, the extremes are not true. That's why I talk about the far right and the far left. Getting up in the morning and thinking all cops are trying to kill young black men is insane. It's ridiculous. But getting up in the morning and saying there is no racism in police departments around this country is equally nuts. We got to fix it. Every police department, and many, 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 many of them are already doing their examinations. You got to find the bad cops, and you got to get rid of the bad cops, without exception. And until that's done, these mistakes and worse are going to continue to be made. And the communities, let's have some responsibility in the communities as well, and responsibility that your young men and women will, in the course of their day, do a better job of not putting themselves in a position where they could be harmed by the police. So let's be fair on both sides. That's all. It's just a call for fairness. I can never understand what it would be like to sit down with my son or my daughter, who are both Caucasian, and say, you got to be careful because the police could stop you for driving while white. It doesn't work that way. But just about every black family has had to have that conversation. And that's not fair. That's not right. So let's not put so much on this Derek Chauvin verdict that everything's going to be fixed. It's not. The work continues. But let's call for fairness on both sides as well, to have a better opportunity and an understanding and a hope that we can redevelop trust between cops and communities. Because I can tell you, I know a lot of cops, and a lot of cops already have it. They're not getting credit for it, but they have the communities who have their back. And there's people in some of the roughest neighborhoods in Chicago who will tell you they want the cops there and in the street because it's their best shot to try to live a normal life. And that's all. It's just fairness. That's it. I keep coming back to that word, but that's the word that applies. All right, one final word on this, and it's kind of an interesting bit of timing, if you will. And depending on your belief system, maybe it's the way it was supposed to be. But the former Vice President Walter Mondale passed away, and Jimmy Carter, the greatest ex-president ever, and the guy that elevated Walter Mondale to a more important position than really any vice president had. Jimmy Carter says he's going to miss his dear friend greatly, and he called him the best vice president in our country's history. Carter's tribute was one of just many to Mondale, who died on Monday, the 19th, at the age of 93. I can tell you in a couple of brief encounters with Vice President Mondale that he was sneaky funny. He was incredibly smart, not a big surprise there, and just a decent guy. And as his former son-in-law once told me, not a guy that needed the room, a guy that was willing to sit back and not go, oh, well, guess what happened to me? Because you can imagine the stories Walter Mondale could tell. And that former son-in-law also shared with me that the happiest times he saw the former vice president were Sunday afternoon family dinners, just like the rest of us, when you could get together with your kids and the people in their lives. So God bless Walter Mondale, and a guy who may never get the full political credit he deserved for an amazing career. But more important than that, and I think more important to him, an eminently decent man. Quite a run. We should all be so lucky to get to 93. In the meantime, before we go to break, I wanted to share with you this amazing letter that he wrote to his team, about 350 folks that work in some form or another in the greater Mondale organization. And he wrote, "Dear team, this is just a couple of days ago. This is Saturday or Sunday before. I guess it must have been Saturday. I think it was 2 days before he passed." And Mondale wrote, "Dear team, well, my time has come. I'm eager to rejoin Joan and Eleanor, Joan his wife, Eleanor his daughter, who died of multiple brain tumors. I'm eager to rejoin Joan and Eleanor. Before I go, I wanted to let you know how much you mean to me. Never as a public servant had a better group of people working at their side. Together we've accomplished so much, and I know you will keep up the good fight. Joe in the White House certainly helps. I always knew it would be okay if I arrived someplace and was greeted by one of you. My best to all of you, Fritz." Nothing needs to be added to that. Rest in peace, Vice President Walter Fritz Mondale. I'm Steve Cochran. This is Live from my office. We'll come back with Pat Brady and Eric Edelstein after this. If you're looking to purchase a new home or refinance your existing home, you need to do what I did. Call Team Hochberg, a trusted local lender. David built his business helping first responders and medical professionals with their mortgages and wanted to do more than just say thank you. So every week, Team Hochberg recognizes first responders and medical professionals for keeping us all safe and healthy. This week, Team Hochberg is recognizing Chief Mike McGreal, Deputy Chief Steve Mella, Battalion Chiefs Steve Cossack and John Baumgartner, and Mark Menzel, as well as the 50 firefighters and EMTs and 5 civilian support staff, all from the Wheeling Fire Department. Team Hochberg purchased lunch from Rise and Dine in Wheeling, owned by Evan Ariola. First responders and medical professionals deserve our appreciation, and family-owned restaurants need our support. If you can afford to, please purchase lunch from a family-owned restaurant for your local police and fire departments and hospitals, too. Team Hochberg helped me and my family and my friends, and they've helped thousands of first responders, medical professionals, and, of course, so many of you who listen to this podcast or on the radio through the years. Look, but they can't help you if you don't call. So do it. 855-56-DAVID. That's 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com. For Homeside Financial, an equal housing lender, NMLS number 1124061. Let's talk about politics because that's what you guys both do. First 100 days, Eric, for President Biden. If you go with, I think, fair reporting, I think he's done pretty darn well.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, he's gone big. He's trying to use this moment as he should, which is an inflection point in America, to really sort of change the narrative, change public policy after a long time of things being tilted one way. I think Biden's a guy who many people thought, is he just going to be a caretaker here and just sort of not be Trump? And I think he's surprised a lot of people. He has a bold agenda. He has been outspoken. He's not afraid to, take on kind of some sacred cows, whether it's in the military on the Afghanistan stuff or it's big, bold public policy at home. I think it's really refreshing. And I think, to the extent his approval ratings reflect that, I think the country's supportive of it too.
Pat, how do you see the first 100?
Yeah, I disagree. In fact, election night, I said maybe this guy's the man for the moment. I don't agree on some of the policy stuff, but just what he's gotten done, most important to me, just his temperament. It's just he's stayed low key. He's not doing anything stupid, no tweets, none of that stuff. it was funny when Trump came in, I started watching CNBC more and more of the business channels because I thought we'd be transitioning out of politics into, business policy and things like that, but immediately went back to Trump world. But now with Biden, I don't worry about the day-to-day political nonsense. I just look to see what he's doing. Again, I don't agree with a lot of it, but I give him credit. Like Eric said, he's going big. I thought he'd be more of a caretaker too. He's been very successful. The Republicans right now, to a great extent, are getting rolled. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with this infrastructure bill, but you got the COVID bill done. And now this big, huge infrastructure bill that they're talking about. He sets the right tone, like with infrastructure, says, let's do it on a bipartisan basis. Although they didn't do COVID that way, but maybe they will. So listen, it's not good for my party, but I got to give, I think it's good for the country to have a mature leader. Again, who I don't agree with all his policies, but at least it's good to have a president that I trust him in his word.
Well, I feel like that he is trying to make laws and make policy and make the effort. But when he doesn't, he has to go with executive orders because I feel like we live in an era where executive orders is the only way a president can get anything done when these two sides hate each other so much.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we are in an era of, increased presidential power, increased polarization, and some gridlock in Congress. And I think, we've seen it with Democrat and Republican presidents in attempt to use that executive power to do something. But I think to me, there's also something more fundamental going on here, which is that for really 40, 50 years, and again, reasonable people can disagree. I know Pat and I will disagree. There's been a point of view that really started with Reagan, that sort of balance between government and private sector was in the Reagan moment too far on the government side. And for the last 40 or 50 years, virtually all public policy has been to advantage the private sector at the expense. And what's happened with COVID is the veneer of the inequality of what that's led to. Yes, it's led to some wealth and growth, but really just with the wealthiest people. And the veneer that's been stripped away after COVID is how the wealthier got even wealthy under COVID, and people who were struggling fell further behind. And I think, again, you can disagree on the policy, but Biden is trying to go right after that kind of 40, 50 year thing where you're trying to rebalance, recalibrate when America works best, when capitalism and a free market works best with some guardrails and some regulation. And I think that's what he's trying to do.
Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a guy that doesn't trust government as a conservative, so I don't really believe in government, but I do believe there's some truth in, and I think this even evolved with Republicans almost 20 years ago, where the Reagan, and there was, I think, an overreach by the government in the 60s, some of the policies, and Reagan was a correction to that. But there is a need for government. I mean, there's some things that government does well, and the things only government can do. And I think now we're going back to the left, hopefully not too far left, but the only thing that makes me nervous, and this just doesn't seem to be important to voters anymore, is under the last three presidents, we've increased our debt. I mean, to I think 14 or 15, increased our debt, not our deficit, our debt, $14, $15 trillion. And now there's some that say that doesn't matter because there's low interest rates and it's debt that we hold ourselves. And there's arguments that we can grow out of that, but it's making me a bit nervous when we spend trillions and trillions and there's no real way or even plan to pay it back.
Well, this gets a little wonky, right? Because it's hard for people to understand why we just don't print one giant coin and pay off the whole number and put it back to zero. But the economy's not set up to work that way, and it's a pretty fragile set of dominoes if you push the wrong one. I don't know that we can. The three of us are sitting here in Chicago, which has $100 billion plus in unfunded pension debt and no real interest in fixing it. So if we can survive in this way, not thrive, but survive, can the government survive being this far underwater?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, again, not to get too wonky. What's the old joke about if an economist is the last person that's ever going to really solve a problem?
Mm-hmm.
But economists have really shifted, and it's almost like decade to decade, Pat, in terms of their attitude on government spending versus debt, and sort of is inflation the biggest deal? Is it unemployment? Is it GDP? Is it debt service? And right now, at least it seems to be the prevailing economic view is that with low interest rates, debt is not the problem. But, obviously it's something that we're going to have to pay attention to and see in the future.
I agree completely. Not just economists. I think people. It used to be remember the '90s when Clinton was running with Perot, and I remember that was the discussion, was the debt and the deficit, and that was front and center. But people just aren't tuned into that anymore. And I kind of agree too. Maybe there's a way to grow out of it somewhat down the road, a long-term plan. But we need to. And this is where I probably disagree with Eric. I think we need to focus on policies that create jobs and are pro-economic growth. And to me, sometimes the focus on the government side interferes with that. But that's a debate. It's funny. Walter Mondale passed away last night.
Yeah, I want to get to that.
And Frank Donatelli, who was a big Reagan guy, is a friend of mine from the RNC days, was a Reagan guy all the way through, put out a nice piece about in '84, even though Reagan won huge, there was an honest debate on the issues you and I are talking about right now.
Right.
And that's the way, instead of this bottom feeding on stupid issues that we've seen with Trump. So this debate has been going on a long, long time.
He also gave one of the most gracious concession speeches after that '84 loss. He was the first guy I worked for in politics. I was a freshman in college and worked on that campaign. So
it's that you knew the guy was a class act when Reagan cracked that joke in the debate about I'm not.
Yeah, and he laughed.
But he didn't just laugh. He really laughed.
Right. Yeah. Right. Rick, and that's funny. I had limited experience with him, Eric, nothing like yours, but he was always an incredibly decent guy. He was sneaky funny, which people never realized, and it was one of those things that if he showed a little more of that, I think he would have been good. But he had that Minnesota nice thing. I'm sorry?
He cracked jokes about himself all the time.
He was very self-deprecating, very family-oriented guy. One of my best friends was married to Eleanor and got to know him very well, obviously, and said the happiest he ever saw him was Sunday afternoons because the whole family would get together. And, Joan passed a few years ago before him. She was an amazingly decent lady. So, and of course, the history piece of this, going back to Biden, he changed the vice president's office. He was the first vice president to have an office in the White House.
First one to name a woman VP, too, right? Or woman.
Female running mate.
And, I'll tell you, just for example, we have a client, Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, who's in Florida. She's I think the first Vietnamese American to serve in Congress. And she tells the story that it was because of Walter Mondale that her family got out of Vietnam, that the U.S. he expanded the U.S. refugee program at the time, and her family had tried to flee Vietnam, and they got trapped and stranded at sea. The U.S. Navy picked them up, put them into a refugee camp, and it was because of Walter Mondale opening up the refugee policy of the United States that she and her family came here, and she's now a United States Congresswoman. I mean, it's sort of, the way it's supposed to work. And she,
but not the way we expect it to work anymore.
Like vice president, like what's the vice president do? But she would tell you, like without her life is very, very different.
Was that the CETA program?
I don't, I'm not entirely sure, but I know it's something that he spent a lot of time overseas working on internationally and getting it done. So.
President Carter came through the studios at WGN promoting several books, and I got to know him a little bit. And again, and just an eminently decent man, and I don't think anybody could argue the best ex-president we've ever had with all the things he's done and accomplished. But I think he grew to respect and really like Mondale and value his viewpoint. And I brought this up to Rahm Emanuel during the campaign. Is Kamala going to get the same sort of treatment and training that Biden was offered as a full partnership, not training so much for Biden, but be a full partner in the White House the same way Mondale started with Carter, even though we had to fight for it a little bit. We haven't seen that much of Kamala. Is she getting some traction? Do we know?
From what I've read, I mean, obviously it's hard to know if you're not there. From what I've read, from what I've heard, she's the proverbial last person in the room with the president. And if you're the last person in the room with the president, you have a lot of influence. So there's sort of two levels that a vice president have influence. They can be given a portfolio, go out and do stuff, and they can be the most senior advisor to the president. And it seems to me that she's playing both of those roles.
Isn't that what Biden was to Obama? Wasn't he the last guy in the room? Or didn't he ask him that?
That's what it seemed like, yeah.
Yep. Sure. According to Rahm, that was the agreement. One of the things that we're standing by, this is April 20th on a Tuesday morning when we're recording this, we're standing by for the Derek Chauvin verdict. And one of the things the Democrats are fighting with is this defund the police argument, it can't be fixed argument versus, in my opinion, the only argument you can make is, the police need to be combed over head to toe. But I want cops on the street. I want cops protecting us. We live in a civilized society, a society of laws. Laws have to be followed. You're going to need the police at times. How are the Democrats fighting through this, and is this a bigger problem than it appears to be?
Well, it's a terrible term because it doesn't even really mean what they mean it to mean. Yes, there are very, very fringe elements.
We'll explain that to everybody what it really means.
Yeah, I know. You guys did a good job of explaining it in the 2020 election. But there's a very fringe element on the left and frankly on the right too that wants to abolish police. But the defund movement is really talking about reallocating resources so that cops are not responsible for everything that comes through 911. And there are examples in cities and communities where you've got caseworkers, you've got psychologists, you've got social workers who are dealing with a lot of stuff we now ask cops to do.
Well, Sheriff Tom Dart has been talking about that for years, that he's running the world's largest mental institution, and these guys aren't trained for that.
Exactly. So, but what's unfortunate, and, I'm a marketing guy and words matter, that kind of term can then be used by Republicans to scare people and tell them that Democrats, want to create chaos and violence when, obviously that's just stupid. But let's be honest. Policing needs to be fundamentally reformed in this country. I mean, I think the incidents we've seen, take the second case in Minnesota, the 26-year veteran pulls the taser. And, you sort of say to yourself, number one, why did they need to violently restrain that guy? He wasn't a threat to anybody. You had his driver's license. You had his information. Where's the training to de-escalate violence? Right. Where's the training that says, let him drive off and go arrest him later in the day? And it feels like, this kind of legacy of power that police have had in this country, and we've become this kind of carceral state. It does need to be ratcheted back, and there needs to be a rethinking on how we do policing in this country.
So to be fair, and devil's advocate here for a second, how do you take the time to do that training, which is crucial, at a time where we have less cops on the street and more financial strain on cities? I mean, it's a pretty tough balancing act in an era of weak politicians at the top. So but where I get nervous is the police. I think it's fairly clear Derek Chauvin murdered a man right in front of us on camera and really didn't give a shit while it was happening. Having said that, I don't think it's so clear that in the Toledo case, for instance, that the officer had a decision to make in a split second and made it. And I think the reaction of cops around the country have done it. So video on somebody's phone or cop cam video doesn't tell the story. You have to go through these trials. You have to go through these investigations. And we don't have the patience for it.
But here's the larger problem, Steve. This has now become in the consciousness of white people when it's been in the consciousness of black and brown people forever. I was on a call with a client, African-American client, who's running statewide. And he said, when they were growing up in Waterloo, Iowa, and when they got their driver's licenses, their parents told them, you cannot get in a car with 4 black kids and drive around. You can't do it. Now, Pat and I didn't grow up like that, Steve. I don't think you grew up like that. That is a different way of a consciousness about how to interact with authority in this country. And so, no, you can't throw it all out. Of course you have to have policing, but I think it's a little bit irresponsible and insensitive to say this isn't a systemic problem that certain groups, certain minority communities have had to face that white communities have not.
Yeah, well, I'm not denying that. Not denying that it doesn't need to be addressed. My question is, how do you address it? Will you still do the day-to-day job of policing? I'll give you a perfect example. The FBI did something a few years ago called the Bandit Cam, where anytime there was a bank robbery, which is the dumbest crime you could possibly commit, they would instantly upload video of the bank robber. And one great story from the FBI was, by the time the guy got home, he had 15 messages on his cell phone that people had seen him on the Bandit Cam. So he called the FBI and said, don't kill me. Here's my address. I'm not armed. Please come arrest me. Why can't the CPD literally put out a weekly video of their interactions with the community and how a cop does his job every day? not some puff piece, but a legitimate look at how they do their job every day, because this isn't a fair representation of policing any more than it's a fair representation of what a young black man does. Every young black man is not a criminal. And every cop that's on the street is not looking to kill a young black man. I don't know how we can't get to that middle point.
But you're raising a bigger issue, which is that it shouldn't just be up to the police to enforce a civil society, right?
Mm-hmm.
It should be up to the community as well. There's stories in dangerous neighborhoods in South Africa where neighbors walk kids to school.
Yep.
You know, there's stories from other places where, you know, and certainly in more affluent neighborhoods, we don't rely exclusively on the police to live in a law-abiding way. We do it because we enforce it with each other. And I think in some ways, when you have distrust between the authorities and the citizens, that's much, much harder to do. So look, there's no easy answer, but failure is not an option here. We have to get it right, or we're going to all continue to sort of see these tragedies.
A guy like Kinzinger, Pat, seems to play a role in this because he's young, he served in the military, and he's got a viewpoint that seems to be very fair-minded. What is his future, and where does he play in the middle of what the Republicans still call the Republican Party?
Let me step back. I do want to address this because I did law enforcement for a while. I'm not disagreeing with any of what Eric says, and I've seen firsthand. In fact, I saw an example 2 years ago of a black friend of mine that was driving out in the western suburbs, and I told him, hey, driving while black's a probable cause out here. Be careful. He said, yeah, last time I got pulled over. And I go, you're kidding. This guy's a minister. Salt of the earth.
No, it's ridiculous. Look, it's absolutely ridiculous, and it happens every day.
And I can give you 15 more stories that I experienced, particularly when I was in the State's Attorney's Office here in the late 80s. But this is where I jump off on some of this. And this is what I'm really fed up with, is that we are ignoring that there's a gang problem. We are ignoring there's a drug trafficking problem, when we are ignoring that there is a gun problem. And some people deserve to be in the penitentiary, and some people deserve to be arrested. And the attitude of the current state's attorney and the current county board president about that we are a social service agency. I've seen Kim Foxx speak with the public defender and the federal public defender once. And with all due respect, I was going to raise my hand. I go, I'm entitled to be represented in living in the city of Chicago if I'm a victim of a crime. And I think that there's been too far a swing that way, that there are no criminals. There are. And I think you'd be, and I said this to the Rounder administration, I go, you guys would be heroes if you went to these communities that have these gang problems and shut it down. There are people that are just trying to live and work and raise kids. And this problem of gangs, when's the last time you saw any of them roll out a gang strategy to deal with it? It's all about bad police. And I'm not in any way discounting what Eric said, because I agree with him a lot.
Well, I agree with you, Pat. I mean, I think you heard that from Mayor Lightfoot yesterday, her frustration at the criminal justice system on the electronic monitoring thing that your friend Sheriff Dart has been talking about, that the influx of guns. You see that statistic that Chicago police have confiscated more guns last year in Chicago than New York and LA combined.
Yeah, 4,000 shootings and 800 murders this year. This is like going back to 1987. So it's a super complicated problem, but I think we've gone too far in Cook County in turning this into a social service issue and not a law and order issue.
Why can't Governor Pritzker come out and speak to the governor of Indiana, where most of these guns are coming from, and say, look, we know they're coming from here, and do a joint press conference, say, this is our joint plan between Indiana and Illinois to shut down the gun running that comes out of Indiana and Illinois. I've never seen those two guys in a room together. Why doesn't that call take place?
They own it, and it's going to be a problem. It's going to take a long time. And I think politically, they just don't want to own it. That was my conversation in the past. We don't want to own that. I'm like, man, there's ways you could fix this or make it better. And this kid's out, Adam Toledo's at 2:30 in the morning running around the 21-year-old being recruited into a gang.
And 13, by the way.
Excuse me. But the older guy was 21. They get parents in the gang, and it's just, it's horrible. And you go down to criminal court and you go, wow, we just wasted another generation of kids.
Well, and to Rahm Emanuel's credit, I mean, nothing made him or upset or crazier when he would see a kid get shot. You know, there was a kid, a little girl, a 7-year-old, sitting in the back of her car with her uncle driving 4:30 Sunday afternoon at a McDonald's drive-thru, and another drive-by happens. Whether they were shooting at the uncle or it was just bad shots, whatever, a 7-year-old's dead. And it goes back to what you said, Pat, and I've said it for years. Folks just want what anybody wants in any neighborhood in Chicago or anywhere around the country. The vast majority of people, I want my kids to go to school safely. I want to be able to go to work in a grocery store and wherever and come home safely. I want to have a nice life. That's it. And it's such an unfair representation of the west side of the city of Chicago that it's just gangland. It's block to block of these gangs, and what you said is absolutely true. Without a strategy, nothing changes.
Yeah, it's really I'm living right downtown now. I love this city, and it's disturbing that there's.
But again, I don't want to, have it all tie up together. But it does go back to what Biden's trying to do, because you have to give these kids some other option, some other avenue than gangs. If those kids grow up and the only male figures to look up to are gangbangers, where do you expect them to go? Where do you expect Adam Toledo to go?
Yep, I agree. And that to me would tie back into, and I appreciate him doing this, but they can't. You talk to a lot of employers, they can't find people to work now because there's no skill training at the level below going to college. That to me has always been an answer to that, an opportunity. Not everybody's going to go to college, but not everybody else be in a gang too.
Let me take you back to Kinzinger. Is there a future in the Republican Party for Adam Kinzinger?
Yeah, I do. I think there is. He's obviously been out there. The Trump influence, contrary to what you might read in some of the political magazines, I think has really waned.
So do I.
Because he's not on Twitter anymore, and he's just kind of a pathetic old man. And we'll see in some of these races where he's picked horses whether or not he actually wins. But listen, I applaud Adam for doing what he's doing. I know Adam very well. He's a good friend. He believes in what he says on This Is Just Nonsense. I agree with him that we need to get back to being a party of principles and not a party of Trump. But I've seen more erosion on the Trump influence, even in Illinois, in the last 3 months than I ever thought I would. And it's primarily because of what happened at the Capitol.
I would say it's interesting that I saw something that the 10 members of Congress who voted to impeach Trump have seen record fundraising.
Oh yeah, and raised $1 million.
Which is interesting.
He also beat Trump by 14 in that district.
Yeah, but the thing that troubles me, and Kinzinger's I think been one of the few, although I'd like him to be more outspoken too, is all the voter suppression stuff going on around the country. And I don't quite get the end game for the Republican Party in this. Like, instead of, changing message or changing approach, they want to change the rules and keep people from voting. And it really is this kind of Jim Crow 2.0. And, are they going the way of the Whigs, where you're just becoming this very minority, very white, very male, very regional party, versus, a direction that a Kinzinger or a Brady would want to take this party. And what's disturbing is all these laws are being passed by basically accepting this big lie that somehow the election was stolen, which everybody knows it wasn't. And so these Republican legislatures, in an attempt to basically hold on to their, pathetic power, are trying to limit the ballot. Well, look, that might work for some period of time, but it's not a long-term strategy for the party.
I've always said that the voter suppression argument, it's an exclusionary argument. It's not, it's about growing the party. It's just another element of people that are going to be irritated with us. But there are people, friends of mine, and a lot of Republicans that believed Trump, a smaller number than it was a month ago, but they believed the big lie that this was stolen. I go, guys, this thing was not stolen. He lost it. And there are some problems with ballot harvesting, some other things around mail-in I think you could make better without suppressing. But I've never seen the upside politically to all that. First of all, people don't understand it. And secondly, it's just a loser issue, because you're going to make 2 Trumpies happy, but piss off or make angry 8 other people that might vote for it.
Well, and that's the other thing that's interesting, Pat. People, we always say in politics, people hate having something taken away that they've had. In these states, like even in Florida, where people have become very accustomed to mail-in ballots, that the ease of doing that, particularly for an older population. Well, when you start restricting that and making it harder for those people, they resent that.
Well, it's insane. It's insane to make it harder for old Floridians to vote. Are you kidding me? It's insane.
Yeah. It's like going to Georgia and telling the old people in the special election, your vote won't be counted.
Right.
Okay, we're not going to turn out. Now we got 2 Democratic senators.
Right. So there's enough of an asshattery at the top of the Republican Party to continue to keep this screwed up.
Hey, wait a minute. I saw Maxine Waters yesterday. There's some asshattery on both sides.
Well, there is an opportunity for, and this is where I was going to go, for someone on the Democrat side of Kinzinger equal to step up and say, let's work together and really excite the younger population again. I don't know who that Democrat is. Eric, do you?
No, but let's not create a false equivalency here. And again, I'm not on the.
I'm talking about doing the right thing, not the wrong thing here. Not a political thing, but doing the right thing to actually. You know me. I really believe in America.
Come on, there's one party that refuses to stand up to this big lie, that basically supported a terrorist attack on the Capitol.
Not basically, did.
Okay, did support
right
the attack on the Capitol to overturn a free and fair election.
Right.
Let's not talk about equivalencies between these two parties and who might be saying more outrageous things. Look at Pat. Pat's doing
see no evil. Yeah, he's the monkey. Yeah, he's the monkey.
You know, we talked about this 4 years ago, Steve, on your show. Our fear, and it came to pass, was that you couldn't maintain the level of outrage you needed in the Trump era because it was outrage every day and it became normalized. And I think the January 6th insurrection is a perfect example of that, where it was just hard to maintain that level of outrage. If you came down from another planet, had some sense of history or politics, and you saw that happen. I saw a great interview with the former Prime Minister of Australia talking about how horrible that assault on democracy was, saying it in a way better than I think I've heard any American politician.
Because the accent's so cool.
His accent is cool. Maybe that made it better. I don't know.
Pat, you need to get out of the house. So no, there is no false equivalency there, and the Republicans are.
I didn't mean to shame you, Steve. I sorry.
Well, you got to work harder than that to shame me.
It's a shameless microphone right there.
The Republican Party is beating themselves into oblivion, especially.
No, come on, guys.
No, listen. If you have,
we're going to win the House back in spite of all this.
I don't know. Keep quietly putting Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene in the corner, and let's see how many votes that costs you.
Okay, let's just, as they said in the Chauvin closing arguments yesterday, let's just use common sense. Take a look at Matt Gaetz and say, yeah, that's somebody I want my daughter to go out with. I mean, the guy looks like he's a complete goof. And
I have to support Pat's profiling here on Matt Gaetz. Yes, go ahead.
But he's Kinzinger's the only one that called for his resignation. But you know how it goes, Eric. These guys now in scandals like this that would have killed anybody in our younger years, he'll hang on down there, and unless there's a criminal charge, he ain't going.
Yep, it'll make him stronger with his base. That's the sad thing.
Yeah. Oh, totally. In the northern Florida.
Is there ever, Pat, a discussion with Kevin McCarthy, who you know I'm not a fan of, and I know he's your friend in the past, so I disagree with you on Mr. McCarthy, but is there ever a point where there's a high-level Republican discussion? That's funny. A high-level Republican discussion. A high-level Republican discussion where they sit down and they go, we can find someone other than Matt Gaetz to win this in Florida. He needs to go. We can find someone other than Marjorie Taylor Greene. She needs to go. Do they have those talks?
Yeah, but the political reality isn't the same thing would probably happen in a Democrat district if Nancy Pelosi said AOC needs their Omar, one of the squad. They're not playing ball. We need to get rid of them. You have an insurrection. It's not worth it. And I agree with you. I think they're both goofs, but you're trying to manage almost an unmanageable caucus. I'm dying to see John Boehner's book.
Is it out yet, by the way?
It is out. I've got it sitting here in the office, but I can't reach it from my comfortable seat. And he's going to be on this podcast in the next couple of weeks.
Steve, you want me to come over and read it to you?
That'd be fantastic. But this is a good place to bring it full circle and wrap it up before we run out of time, because, Pat, you know Boehner a bit. We all were around for the Boehner era. Boehner comes in with Newt Gingrich. Newt's one of the worst human beings on the planet, my opinion. Jump in if you want. But how much does Boehner have to own developing what he now says is the shit in the Republican Party?
Well, he inherited it because remember in 2010, in a reaction to what the public saw as overreaching by Barack Obama, we picked up 63 seats. Republicans did, and that's when a lot of it was the Tea Party group. As you remember, the Tea Party was founded right here as a group of people that were fiscal conservatives. Well, that kind of morphed into the people like Gates and some of the other people that ended up going there, Jim Jordan. They didn't want to do anything. In fact, Boehner had a deal cut with Obama, a long-term deal on deficit reduction, debt reduction, and entitlement reform. Had a great deal, and I think it's in the book. I've heard him give the speech. But a lot of that Boehner inherited, and he fought with them the whole way through, and then begged Paul Ryan to come in just to see if he could manage it. Paul Ryan couldn't manage it either. So I wouldn't blame Boehner at all for that. He inherited all that. John Boehner, I dealt a lot with him here when I was party chairman on the just a fantastic, common sense, successful, great guy who wanted to get things done, wanted to reach crowds. I think he and Obama ended up being friends, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they got along pretty well.
He told a story about Obama quit smoking, right? Well, Boehner's going to smoke till the last moment. So I guess he would sit there and smoke in front of him. Go, you want a cigarette?
And the book is entertaining because it does point out that, and I think Boehner said something almost specifically this. I'm not a fighter. I'm not the kind of guy that would do this, but I would punch Ted Cruz in the face. There's a lot of stuff like that in the book, which I really enjoy. It's not at a point where I'd read it to my 5-year-old granddaughter yet, but it does give me a smile on my face.
And you saw those stories about when he was recording the audiobook, he would just say profane shots across the bow at Ted Cruz.
Right.
Yeah. I was playing Paradise Valley Country Club a couple of years ago, and I came whipping around the corner, and Boehner's sitting there playing, getting ready to take off with Dan Quayle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's a pretty good guy. I think he's about a 6.
Quayle was always a really good golfer, right?
Yeah, I played with Quayle. He was very good.
Great vice president, but he was a good golfer.
Well, gentlemen, it's been great as always. One last thing from either one of you.
Just congratulations on your 100th episode, Steve.
It's one of the great accomplishments in American history, I believe.
Here's to thousands more.
Either that or turning it over to Eric any day now. Pat, any last thing you need?
As always, I just agree with Eric.
Pat, what's your company called?
Next Generation Strategies. Pat _ whatever, Brady.
He's an expert on social media.
Spell out the whatever.
On Twitter.
Whatever.
And I think, and Eric, your company?
AL Media.
All right. And Eric's got plenty of business, so don't call him. In the meantime,
wasting my time doing this, man, I'd be swimming in it.
Sure you would. In the meantime, I do sincerely want to thank you both for the friendship, but also for being a part of those first 100 shows. We could get to 105 at this rate.
Hey, before
and thank you for being out here.
Where are we? What point?
Excuse me? What do you mean, what point?
Are we in the show?
Are you in the show? Yes. The 100 show, which is posted and up now, features both of you.
Oh, God, just like I have to do my homework and listen.
Yeah. That's the painful part. Eric Adelstein, Pat Brady, Steve Cochran. This is Live from my office. Thank you, boys.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks, Steve.
If you are a family member or looking to purchase a new home, do what we do. Call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender. He knows your house money better than anybody. Meet Aria, 30, a web designer, making $90,000 a year. Was purchasing her first home, so she called her dad, Bob, and needed some advice. Bob said, Aria, you got to call Team Hochberg. It's the only lender I trust. His youngest daughter, very special, wants to make sure she does the right thing. Aria followed Dad's advice, called Team Hochberg for a free consultation, and Team Hochberg answered Aria's questions, pulled her credit, preliminarily approved her for a mortgage. Team Hochberg also introduced Aria to a Team Hochberg trusted realtor to help her find that home that she would love. And real estate attorney David Schluter was introduced as well, because Team Hochberg truly is a team. Team Hochberg has helped thousands of podcast listeners like Bob, their kids like Aria, all understand the home buying process. Locate a home as well. They're helping there. They're helping secure that mortgage. But look, they can't do it if you don't call 855-56-DAVID or 56david.com. That's 855-863-2843. Or go to 56david.com. Tune into Home Sweet Home Chicago, hosted by David Hochberg, Saturday mornings at 10 on WGN. And Homeside Financial, as always, is an equal housing lender. NMLS number 1124061. This is Live from my office, and if you listen with any regularity, you know that I like to take one moment in each episode to plug a charity worthy of mention. And I certainly would like to hear yours. So drop me an email at thecochranshow@gmail.com. Give me some details on some folks you think are worthy of free publicity, and I'd be happy to take care of that here. Just make sure you include their website or information about them or why they move you, and we'll go from there. Now, in light of what's going on and has gone on in the Twin Cities, one of my favorite places, one of the great experiences of my life for the 5 years I was on the radio there, I thought I'd bring in one of the great people I've ever known, my lifelong friend, Craig Jockola, who is a Minneapolis resident, and he is involved with an organization that I think is perfect to take a positive out of what's happened in the Twin Cities and pay it forward. And that organization is called The Cookie Cart, our charity of the episode. Hello, Craig.
Hello, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing fine. You know, you've told me all these great stories about the Cookie Cart through the years. It's one of the many organizations you support, but I just think it's a great story and perfect for the timing we're in now because there's kids that need direction, and the Cookie Cart helps them get that, right?
That's right.
How'd you get involved?
Well, it's you need to know a little bit about the history of the Cookie Cart first, and then just briefly, it was literally started in Minneapolis, in northwest Minneapolis, by a nun here, Sister Jean, and she noticed the kids in the neighborhood, that were just hanging around, not doing anything. So they started baking cookies in her kitchen, literally in her kitchen. And then they would put them in a wagon and walk down the street and sell them. And she started having more and more kids that wanted to participate in that. And it grew from there to where there's a bakery. There's actually 2 locations now. There was a second location that opened about 2 years ago in St. Paul. So there's one in Minneapolis, one in St. Paul. And what it does essentially is the kids come in. They're really from the schools that don't get as much attention, I guess you'd say.
So kids from tough backgrounds or tough neighborhoods, maybe?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Really difficult, home lives, and
sure.
It's just tough. I mean, it's that part of town. You have them in Chicago, you have them in Minneapolis.
Sure.
And yet the kids themselves are just, fantastic. So I originally, in 2015, stopped in there. I was doing product development work for vendors working with Target stores. And I stopped in, I tumbled off the turnip truck to see if they could make some test granola bars, since, it was called a bakery.
Sure.
And I found that it was more than a bakery. It was these kids, most of them, it's their first job. So in many cases, you're literally applying for Social Security if they haven't done that or have that, sure, or have their cards. And then you're explaining to them a lot of the good adult lessons, like why the hell there's so many taxes taken out of my check. Make it. So they have to explain how FICA works and all of that. But it's just really as a first job, they learn. There's the bakery, and they're literally baking cookies, a commercial bakery. All the rules of food service, with the hair nets and the gloves and all of that. And then there is the retail part, which is where they sell the cookies. And so, I went in, no, they couldn't make granola bars, but I sat and talked with the director and then watched the students baking through the window, and then came back and volunteered a few days. And then I've been, the big supporter of theirs, ever since.
So they had you at hello and the smell of chocolate chips.
That's it. Sugar. You had me with sugar.
But you think about it. I don't know that you and I've ever talked about this, but my first job was as a caddy on a golf course. My first job where I had to go somewhere was at a fast food joint. And it's interesting what you brought up before, because you don't know what you don't know. And on top of filling out forms on how to get paid and figuring out what taxes are and things of that nature, this also teaches you what every kid needs to learn, and that's respect for others, respect for your elders, showing up to a place of business on time. Early would be good in my case, and learning how to be a person who can work in the adult world. So I imagine it's a huge deal. But to take something that started as a simple idea from this nun, talk about the success they've had.
Well, they've generally they have somewhere between 50 and 70 students at a time.
It's a big deal.
It is, and there's a considerable wait list for students to participate. They limit the amount of time that you can be there. You don't start as a freshman and go all through your senior year. Generally the students are done at the beginning of their senior year. So I think the normal amount of time that they're employed is just under 2 years. So, figure 15 to 17.
Right.
And then the new group comes in, or, they're constantly rotating in because all students aren't hired at the same time. So, but, you have your cart captains and you have your, the students, some are, drawn to social media. So they have a great Instagram presence and Snapchat and TikTok now and all of that. So it's very, the students, the kids couldn't be any more normal when it comes to sitting down and talking with them and their hopes and their aspirations and their curiosity about business, about entrepreneurs, and about what they want to be. They're just like you and me, Steve. They have no idea what they want to be.
Well, yeah, but we're older. We should know by now. But as a
major next year.
As a mentor to these kids, it's got to be great for you. And then when they get to be a senior and they're sort of timing out on the job, I know that's got to be tough for them as well, because 15 to 17, try to remember what it felt like when you were that age. Those are some of the most memorable relationships you'll have in your life. And along with a great experience and a great teaching thing, I would think this sends them off to the next level, right? I mean, a lot of these kids hopefully go on to college if they choose.
Well, again, the uniqueness of their experience to maybe yours and mine is that we have what we consider a lost year. Then, if at the beginning of their senior year they are no longer with the cookie cart, they're back in the environment that they were in when they started at the cookie cart. So they can backtrack very quickly during that year and lose the kind of the momentum they had to go on to college or anything. So actually right now we're trying to work out a plan to keep what we call the cookie carters engaged through their senior year in different ways, not in the bakery, not baking, not doing the things to do, but then hopefully continue to, we're working on a scholarship program now to encourage them to take college courses during their senior year, and then, seamlessly, we hope, go into 1 year and 2 year programs at the community college.
Now, I know how generous you have been to this organization, and I know how much you love this organization, but for folks who have had success in their careers, like you have and like I have, that you stumble into this place and it becomes part of your life story. What do you say to folks who, have means and maybe haven't exhausted all the ways they can help? Well,
I personally feel, responsibility for giving back. I don't take for granted what I've been given and what I've earned, and the strokes of luck that I've had in my lifetime. So, I've always said the only thing more fun than making money is giving it away.
Yeah, I agree.
When you can get to the point where, just like $5,000, $10,000 to an organization like Cookie Cart is so meaningful. A nudge and some words of encouragement and that to these students is, can be life changing. There's someone believing in them and someone saying, "Hey, you're not crazy. It took me 4 years to figure out what I wanted to do."
Sure.
You forget how much they look up to adults, and that's a huge responsibility.
And wherever you're listening, anywhere, sure, and wherever you're listening, anywhere in the country, it doesn't have to be the Twin Cities or Chicago, but every city has something like this. And in the course of a short Google search, I know you can find it as well. And I always tell people too, there's a charitable rating website called Charity Navigator. There's several, but that's one of the best. And, you can put these charities in or search for a charity that you want to help. And that's a good way to go about it as well. But don't just think about helping. Step up and help. And again, After all that's happened in Minneapolis, in the Twin Cities in the last year, I just think Cookie Cart's a great story. So easy way to make a donation online, too, at cookiecart.org. Craig Jockola, thanks for the support you give them and the work you've done for them. And I know you've gotten 10 times back from them and all the kids you've met in the last several years and the ones you'll continue to meet. So thanks for coming on and explaining it.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity, Steve. I appreciate it.
Cookiecart.org, and this is Live from my office. Thank you once again for listening to Live from my office. I'm Steve Cochran. I thank Ross Cochran, producer, executive director, the brains and the good looks in this operation. Thank you, son, for getting this on the air and for doing such a great job in putting together our 100th episode. Also available wherever you hear Live from my office. I hope you subscribe, hope you tell your friends, and I hope you'll be here for the next episode. New episodes drop Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for the support. God bless the people of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and God bless America tonight and every night. Let there be peace. I'm Steve Cochran, and this is Live from my office.
Thank you for listening to Live from my office, a service of Monkey Run Productions. All rights reserved. The podcast is hosted by Steve Cochran, and it's mixed, edited, and produced by me, Ross Cochran. Support the show by subscribing wherever you're listening and by telling your friends about it. Follow Steve on all social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And make sure you check out this episode's show notes for relevant information discussed during the conversations. You can also email the show directly at thecochranshow@gmail.com with any questions or comments. And that's the best place to tell us about your favorite nonprofit so we can make sure we mention them on the next episode. Steve is available for corporate speaking gigs. He would love to MC your event. And occasionally, he's funny. Thank you for listening. Head to cochranshow.com for more.